Hey guys, this is Kyle from Genie. We just put out a brand new Cyberpunk 2077 cover the other day of Wushu Dolls, one of the cooler and heavier tracks from the soundtrack. The mix we did came out super cool and way better than we expected it to. We actually did the entire thing in one day. We did all the production, the lights, the recording, the video, all in a single day. Usually when you mix fast, the results are better, and I think in this case, it really showed. Let me take you inside Reaper, and I'll show you some of the production tricks that we did. I'll see you in Reaper. Okay guys, so here we are into our Reaper session. Lots and lots of tracks, lots and lots of sound effects going on in this session. We wanted to make it huge and full band, but I really loved the way the synths were in the original song, so I wanted to make sure I kept kind of that huge electronic, almost nu metal feel of the original song, except put our twist on it, obviously. These are all the big transition production elements we have this whole section right up here. All of those are special hits and impacts that accent the drums and accent different parts. We have a couple of toms. We have your typical drums, bass. All these brown tracks right here are guitars. And at the bottom we have synths and more synths and tons of synths. So I'll go through each layer and talk about why I made the choices that I did as far as picking the synths. I'll go through each part one by one and show you the layering that I had to do to achieve the size of the mix that we did. Before we do that, I just have to talk about my mastering chain. I have a reverb right up front on the mastering that it's completely off. So if you go into my reverb, it's completely dry. Usually I'll use that for the ends of songs. I'll automate the mix level right here. So at the end of a song, if we have a long ring out or something, usually a guitar or a bass will ring out for a certain amount of time before it kind of dies. And if I want that ring out extended, what I'll usually do is fade this mix up. So it will kind of take the space of those long sustained guitars that we might have to stretch to make it ring out the full size. Let me show you a little bit of what that sounds like. So here's the end of the song. And you can hear that reverb kind of swelling in and taking in the space of those guitars. It's a really cool trick I started doing maybe a couple months ago. I wasn't really happy with the way our guitars were sustaining out at the end of songs, so this really helped me with that. Next, I have a virtual mix rack doing some EQ moves. The FG Gray, which is compressing only on snare hits. It's a pretty typical move for modern producers. Then we got a couple of EQs, virtual tape machine, which I'm slamming pretty hard. I just recently got this flatline limiter. Works really well for taming snare and kick transients. And then from there, since flatline doesn't quite get it as loud as I would want without really clipping the snare and kick transients, I then run it into my normal mastering processor, FGX. I've been using this forever. And it's so quick, so easy. You just kind of turn a knob up and it sounds huge. So, I mean, there's other things you can do, but I don't use them. Oh, one more thing I want to show off is this tool I got helps with mastering a lot, especially on something like this where you're working fast. This is tonal balance control from Isotope. Pretty cool frequency analyzer. So you have your low end range, your mid, your upper mid, and then your high end range, which is they can generate it from all different types of music. So they have a bass heavy type where you can see these little boundaries changing. Country has a little bit of a different normal frequency curve than a modern song. And what's cool about it too is you can bring in your own songs from mixes that you might like. It'll analyze the whole mix and make a frequency curve based on that mix. So I have a Devin Townsend song in here. I don't remember which one, but the mix is great. You can see how this curve is very tight. And then there's also, I think I have a periphery one in here too, which I've been using. So when you run your mix through it, you can see there's these white lines that pop up and they kind of level themselves. And if you're close to these bounds, you know that your mix is going to translate pretty well. For a mix like this, it helped me a ton because the low end in this mix is so thick that I was constantly thinking that I had too much of it until periodically I'd check out tonal balance control and realize that it was sitting high, but it wasn't as high as I thought it was. Let me just put a section of this the mix in so you can just see how it moves. So you can see here, I might be a little light on the mid-range, but you don't have to match these. It's just a guide. For me, because my room it's a multi-purpose room. It's not totally treated as it should be. it really helps to look at this and say my low end is good, or I definitely need more upper mids. One of the habits I had before was I would mix so much upper mids into my song, not realizing it, to try and fight my room's enhanced low end. So I just keep adding and adding upper mids. But this helped me dial it back and kind of retrain my. All right, so let's start with the intro. The intro starts off with this FM styled guitar. Let's listen to just the guitar part. So that guitar, we actually record guitar with a Line 6 Variax. It's really changed our workflow for the better. We can have guitars tuned as low as we need them to. So in this case, I think we were a whole octave down. So our low string was a lower E than a standard E. That's all with a twist of a button. We don't have to detune or change guitars or anything. All the rhythm sections in this session retract with that octave down guitar. So you're not hearing an 8 string, you're not hearing a 7 string. It's a normal 6 string Variax with the octave switch flipped. For this tone, I have all these disabled because I like to print my my tones. Looks like for this tone, we have an instance of Nolly, which is on a very low gain setting. And then also what most of this tone is coming from is Decapitator. So the amp is just giving it that really light amp sound. And I'm using the Decapitator to almost give it an FM effect and adding a bit of drive to it. Decapitator is so sick. I've been using it for, 10 years, however long it's been out. It's kind of a go-to when you really want to mangle something. So I have the low cut up pretty high because I don't want a lot of lows. The high cut down a lot to try and get that FM, and the tone is all the way bright. So let's listen to that one more time. High definition, slick, lo-fi tone. I really like the way that came out. That's also accompanied with these stick clicks. I have these stick clips sampled out of Steven Slate 5. So I just programmed in some tom rims for that one. And I think for the intro, we might have a couple of pads that are swelling in the background. Yep, we have this intro pad, which is all of these synths we have down for this entire track. I think maybe besides a couple, we're all done with Anna 2, which is a great wavetable synth that is part of the Slate bundle. I think it's by Sonic Academy. It's a amazing synth. So many options. It's so customizable. Unfortunately, since I print my synths as soon as I'm happy with them, I can't pull up what the synth settings were, but this is the intro pad. Just super grimy. It just sits right underneath that intro guitar, adds a little bit of grit to it, a little bit of high end to the intro part. Here's another pad. I layered a ton of pads. This entire song, you'll notice all of the synths. It's not just one synth sound, it's 2 to 3 synth sounds layered to get the synths to really feel 3D. So I find a lot of times when you use one synth for one synth line, it sounds fine if you want it to be in the background, but since this song is so synth heavy, I found myself layering synths on top of synths. So here's the intro pad number 2. A little more lower mids in that one to kind of take the spot, I guess, of the low end, even though there's not much going on at the beginning. And then we have one more swirly pad. That pad is great for just adding texture to the beginning. You don't really hear any of those. I mean, you hear them, but they're more of a atmosphere builder. So let's listen to that whole intro. Oh, I also have a sweep in to the intro, so you'll hear that when I play the intro for you right now. Coming out of the intro, we have this little dubby swoop down that I made with Anna with the using the mod wheel and a normal synth. Connected the mod wheel to the wavetable to alter that while the swell was going down. Pretty cool sound. Oh, I have a swell in to the next part. The name of the game on this song was using as much cinematic tools as possible to really build the parts up and let the quiet parts be dramatically quiet and let the big parts be as big as I could get them. So this little fade in, this little cinematic fade in was a great move to then cut out after, it makes the following part hit that much harder. Oh, it's so grimy. Coming out of that, we have another impact, I think, on that coming back hit. Yep. And then we have some guitars. We have the bass comes in there for the first time. Here we have a riser that helps that part get a little bit of a lift. That's pretty cool. You don't really hear that in the mix. We also have a rise bass, which is just the bass that's going, the pitch of the bass is just rising, that's it. Gives the part a feel where you like, it almost feels like you're gonna fall off a cliff at the end. It's pretty cool. So coming into the verse, let's check out some guitars. We have quad-tracked guitars for the rhythms on this one section. They're both playing a little bit different things, so let me go through those. For the rhythm guitars, I'm using Nolly. Again, I'm EQing before. This is a crazy EQ. I'm EQing before Nolly because the DIs are fairly dull coming out of the Variax, so I boost at 9 dB of high end before it's even hitting the amp. That gives the pick attack a lot more room to like really hit the amp first. Makes the tone super, super scrapey. So let's listen to the rhythm guitars by themselves. Pretty sludgy, pretty cool. I do all my EQ and compression on the rhythm guitar bus. The only processing you'll see on the actual rhythm guitars themselves is just the amp. I do this, one, to save processing power, and two, it's a lot easier to A/B EQ and compression choices when you can hear both speakers playing the guitars at the same time, instead of copying the left channel to the right and then listening and then making an edit and copying it over again. For the guitars, I just have Pro MB, just sucking that low end up on the chugs. I have a virtual mix rack doing some EQ and some light high-end filtering. I also have a pitch shifter on the whole bus, which comes into play later in the song. It's always at 0, so there's no effect on the guitars right now until the automation hits. So we'll go back to that later. The second guitar track is Jeff playing those same guitars just as chords. So the other one was more of a single notey thing, and this is more of a chord thing. So here's the second guitar layer. That tone is so Variax. The problem a lot of people have with the Variax is the artifacting, because I mean, when you're tuning a 6-string guitar down digitally, a whole octave, it tends to get a little warbly, but I think that's why I like the Variax's tone so much, is that nothing sounds like the Variax. Just like any high-end guitar that has its own sound, the Variax also has its own sound, and it's totally unique. Here are the leads. I think they're playing just a high version of that same thing. Yep, so the leads are just accenting that. I use Plini for my leads, Neural DSP Plini. I'm using also that high-end boost before Plini too, because to handle the darker DI sounds. That's all running through Virtual Mix Rack, almost the same setup as for rhythm guitars, just with different settings. What else is going on in this part? We got bass comes in for the first time. Bass tone is pretty big on this song. Pretty grimy, pretty gross, very punchy. So for the bass tone, I use Neural DSP Parallax, always Neural. Before Parallax, I am doing some compression and some EQ. So I have a high-end boost for the bass before it hits the amp. I have a little bit more grit coming from the virtual channel, and I'm compressing a little bit just to make sure the bass DI is hitting Neural at a even-ish level. I have an EQ just doing a little bit of suck out of the lows. I don't know if that's a room note I have, if I'm hearing that ringing note constantly in my room, or if that's in the bass, but I just sucked it out anyway. I have multipass, which is from Kilohertz, compressing the low ends, distorting the mids and distorting the highs, but different kinds of distortion for both. I find this is an easier way to control the types of distortion. I can do the same exact thing in Parallax, but I feel like I have a bit more control and options when I do it inside of Snap Heap. I'm also using Bass Rider from Waves. I never usually use this, but since this song was so synth heavy, I wanted to have that low end be tight and really not move. So I'm using Bass Rider to just kind of hold the low end in a spot while the bass does whatever it wants. Pretty cool. I also have the drums. The drums are pretty big sounding in this song. Let's take a listen. Also helping the drums out in the song itself, I have a couple of layers that are helping the drums. So I have this snare helper layer, which I added in right at the end of the mix because I wanted the snare to pop out a little more on the backbeats. So I have this digital snare just on the those backbeat snare hits. So let's listen to that. It doesn't play fills or anything. That snare just helps the main backbeat, and I believe that's from Juggernaut. Yep, Juggernaut massive dubstep setting is doing that snare. Juggernaut is so friggin' sick. A lot of my impacts and textures and sound effects come from Juggernaut sample library too. So let's listen to this whole verse, and I'll point out some cool things that happened during it. Oh, I also have this huge drop here. And I have another impact that comes in alongside of that too. I love that sound so much. I have a Pro Q on them, just taking out some of the low ends because the impacts tend to get a little low heavy. So I have Pro MB that it's just doing a little bit to, if any of those impacts get out of control, it just kind of helps it sit in the mix a little better. So let's listen to this whole verse. Also, I forgot to mention the main part of this whole song, which I forgot to mention somehow, are these synths that are accenting the main riff. Also, we have this cool dub sound that I made in Anna. Wow, that's so 5 years ago, right? So the main synth line is a stack of 3 leads doing the same thing. So we got this one. That one just has a ton of movement. So after laying that one down, I think it had so much movement and it was great, but it didn't hold a lot of weight. So I added another one in there. This one looks like it's a little higher. That's just a pretty typical sound, synth sound. We have one more doing something else. I think that's the same synth sound as this one, except I have Fatterator on it and I'm just adding a ton of grit and I think it's an octave lower. So all those together are being processed through one group. I have Little Altar Boy on it, I think adding some grit to the entire thing, Decapitator again to control it. Pro Q just taking off some of the high end and a little bit of reverb. So together the stack sounds like this. And yeah, it's detuned a little bit. The synths are fighting each other, and the detuning in this song works out so well because it makes the part way more tense. If everything was perfectly in tune with each other, it wouldn't have the feel that it does. In the background of the verse, I also have this light pad going on. Just one note that evolves as the verse goes on. The one note really helps glue all the parts together, except for when it switches here. So let's keep listening to the verse and see if I come across anything else. As we move on in the verse, there was this part with palm muting. We wanted to accent with the drums. I wanted the lighter track that has the palm muting in it to pop out a little more over this just thick chords track, so I just automated the volumes up a little bit. The volume of the rhythm up and the volume of the heavy rhythm down, just at that one part. Adds a little just movement. I mean, the whole name of the game here is movement. You want each part to feel a little bit different than the previous. Cool thing I did here, I don't know where I learned this or if it's something I came up with. So one cool thing I do with the low end of the kick is when the fast parts go, the low end builds up so much. So I'm automating a small chunk of a high pass filter. So the low end cuts off a little higher. I usually like my kicks around 50 or 60. On these fast passages, I have the high pass filter hitting 90. So a lot of the low end that is going to build up from those double kick parts kind of vanishes. Just really cleans those kicks up. Coming out of that, we have the main lead that comes in, which is first played on a synth. So the same synths come in playing the exact same thing they were. And then I have the main synth line. And that synth is coming out of Massive. Even though I have it labeled Jugs, I must have used Juggernaut at first and switched over to Massive. I'm just using this typical Anthemy Saw preset, which is also a little bit detuned. That helps with the aggression once again. Playing the exact same line as the leads here. So both of these leads. Really cool sound. So what I'm doing here is I'm automating snap heap in. So I have the mix set to completely dry here and snap heap wet over here. So what I'm doing with snap heap is love snap heap. Chorus effect and a distortion on top of the already distorted guitars mixed in just to grid them up and add way more movement to a standard guitar centric lead, because this song is supposed to be different than that, right? So we have an impact coming in, and again, tons of impacts all over the place. So coming out of the second verse, or the second half of the first verse, there's a break part filled with synths, just tons of synths once again. So let me show you what this sounds like. So we have these cool guitars that Jeff laid down. They're very dissonant. These have Echo Boy on them and a little bit of reverb, and I think that's it. Yep. I once again printed the distortions down. I always do that. And I'm just using Pro Q to filter out a lot. You don't need these frequencies on stuff like this. Gives way more room for everything else. We got, believe we have another impact coming in. Yep, we have 2 more impacts, like always on stuff like this. Pretty sick stuff. 2 more impacts. We have bass doing some cool shit. We have rhythm guitars again, and we have more synths. So let's check these synths out. I have these big kicks that are helping the drums poke. Yep, the very far kick sounds. Works great in the mix though. We have a texture going across this whole thing, just giving the whole thing like the swirling ambience. That's really cool. We have another texture from Juggernaut. Let's hear this. So it just sounds like another impacty kind of thing, maybe with a being the low end filtered out a little bit. We have another texture from Juggernaut. Why not, right? Yep, stuff like that makes these parts really stand out. And we have a pad. It's called Random Pad. That's a cool name for it. That's an awesome sounding pad. From Anna, we have this, which, oh, it's a little glitchy dubby thing coming out. That is just sitting in the background. Once again, adding the movement. You're mainly hearing those reverb tails. And that's it for this part. All right, so let's take a listen to this part and go into the next part. It gets a little more interesting. This this next part, we have two more impacts. Always transition, baby. So we have a disgusting sounding cymbal and some sort of bass drop. We have these tom hits that are helping those single tom hits. They swell in, and this is helping lengthen and extend the front and the back of those my drum tom hits. I thought that was kind of added toward the ends of the mix where my tom hits they just sounded like drums. And in a song like this, you really don't want the sound to just be drums. You want it to be like hyper drums, you know? Thick clicks from the beginning come back in. Bass is playing some cool stuff. That's just giving the part movement too. Jeff laid down this really cool, I call it guitar swanks, which is a version of the main riff, but played more chordsy and junky. So let's listen to that. That's cool. It's got a repeater on it, which is a delay, but the right channel mix is at 0, so you're not getting any delay in the right channel, but the left channel has a little bit of a 30-second note delay with kind of a high feedback. So what that's doing is giving you the swanks in this speaker, but it's also giving you a little bit of room and feel in the left speaker. It really helps spread it out and give a sense of depth and movement too. We have tons of synths, so let's check these guys out. We got thick holds. Yep, just a low, grimy synth. We have grinder. Let's check this. That's a cool one. We have smooth. All of these are just helping to build a three-dimensional atmosphere. I could have used one pad, but the part would have just felt too small. This one really helps. This is Pumper. This is a slow rising synth that pumps on the upbeats. Check that out. For this synth, I also have repitch, giving it a sub-octave mixed in a little bit. I think I probably felt that it was a little too thin for the part because the bass is playing something more spotty than consistent. So I think I wanted something else to just fill that area. I also have a synth beat Juggernaut drums that have been treated pretty heavily. Let's take a listen to these guys. That's a really, really cool sound coming out of Juggernaut. That is just adding a lot of movement to my drums. Almost, once again, everything in this song feels like like Mad Max, you know? It's kind of got that Junkie XL feel to it, especially those drums. We have a high add. This looks like it's just helping the transition. Yep, that's just helping coming out of the next part from where the lead left off. Instead of just having that frequency range die off, it's kind of helping it move out like that. And that's it for that part. So let's keep moving here. Oh, I have a riser coming out for the next part. For this one, it's pretty much doing the same thing as Pumper, except constantly rising. I have a kilohertz pitch shifter chorus, a trance gate, which is giving it that LFO movement instead of actually using a sidechain. I just find it's easier and a little more predictable to use the trance gate. And I think that's it for that part. Yep. This just kind of sits in this area until that riser is finished, and then the song kind of, the same part kind of takes on a different shape when the drum roll comes in. So let's listen to that. Take a listen to that second half. I think I have some cool stuff going on. The arrangement is pretty much the same going into that part, except these rhythm guitars come back in and they're playing this rising build that's in the song. That is being accented by this synth layer I have doing this exact same thing. And you'll notice for all the processing I'm doing on these synths, it really just comes down to high pass frequency control and low pass frequency control, and then just gridding everything up. If you compress your synths too much, then they're just going to sound flat and they're not going to poke. I don't think I'm doing anything else with it. No, I'm not. So I have these high pass and low passes that come up automatically when I pull up ProQ in these little control knobs here. So I can control them without having to open the plugin. It's really, really helpful. It also helps train your ear a little bit. So you're not just looking at this graph and making the move based on the numbers. You're doing it based on what you're hearing instead. Really helpful for ear training. So what else we got? We got synths, the grinder again. All these guys are playing the exact same parts as before. And that's it. It's the only thing that really changed in this is the rhythms, and that riser pad gave the part a whole new feel. Oh, and the drum roll too. Let's come out of this into the lead section. So the leads, the snap heat is turned off for the leads, so it's just a regular old guitar lead tone. Nice and smooth though. And the rhythm guitars end up doubling up that same line they were playing earlier. Part's got a ton of tension, and the little drum solo-y snare thing at the end helps with that a lot too. I have the riser once again doing the same parts. That's a really sweet sounding synth. So beefy. Pumper is still going. All these guys are still just playing the exact same parts. The only thing that added there was the lead, and we added my little drum solo-y thing coming into the next part. I wanted this part to build like crazy because I knew the next part was going to be dead, eventually leading into this huge breakdown. I have two risers coming out of this part that are like way too big, and they hit the limiter way too hard and take over the whole mix for, I don't know, about 1 second, and then they eventually die. And then the whole song dies at that point too. Those are way too loud, but in the context of the mix, it sounds great. The intro comes back almost exactly orchestrated as it was, except without the pads. Really makes the part deaden until the next part where the breakdown hits super heavy. That's fun. What we have here is these little hits from the intro. These are just the same exact hits that happened in the first verse, right before the first verse. One production choice I made was to have this hit a beat early. So the riff here, you think it's going to end a little further down the riff than it does. It ends a little bit earlier, and that throws you off guard, making the next part feel strange. But when that snare hits, you're like, holy crap, there it is. I think that makes the part feel the way it does. So what we have coming out here, we have impacts right when that breakdown hits. That's a cool little section. So these impacts hit on the first beat with the guitars. This cymbal is accenting that first downbeat with the snare, and then that same cymbal glitches back up into this next little bass droppy thing. We also have the bass doing a slide down. In the background of this entire breakdown, the intro riff is playing. Really cool, as it makes it pretty creepy. So also, I forgot I even did this. So the rhythm guitars, I have pitch shifting down at the end of their ring outs here. So let's listen to this. Before we listen to that, these two guitars here are the exact same thing, except this one is this one, except pitched down another octave. So Jeff's already down-tuned octave guitar. I pitched down another octave, ran it through an amp, and then that's helping a lot with the size of this part. So let's listen to the original rhythm guitar with the pitch, the drop pitch on it. And then I doubled that, pitched it down, and we have this. Awful, awful, awful sound. But together it sounds great. It just sounds fat, you know, takes up a lot of room. And I think this whole part is just guitar driven for the first time in the song. Guitar and impact driven. That makes the whole part stick out like a sore thumb because there's no synthy elements going on. The rest of the part is a pretty standard breakdown, just a bunch of chuggies. But one thing that was cool was adding this drop tuned guitar in there. Helps with the body of everything. Really makes everything sound disgusting. Let's take a listen to that whole breakdown. Okay, so let me go over some of that stuff. Here we have a reverse guitar right after this hit that pops in. That helps make the end of the ringouts more interesting. I could have just left it normal, like this. Yeah, but that's stupid. Why would you do that when you can do this? That's way cooler. Towards the end of this, we have a couple of cool things. So stupid. Moves like this are what makes mixes cool, but you're looking at them like I'm looking at this now and I'm thinking this is just such a dumb idea. So in this part, I have the pitch down guitars staying the same and then going up an octave so they're matching with these guitars, but at the same time, these guitars are dropping down 2 octaves, so they're even lower. But at what makes this part sound cool is when you have 2 of the same sources on each side, the 2 of the same exact files, when you play them together, they become almost mono. They sit right in the middle. So what's cool about this part is as this double-tracked guitar is moving up, this one is moving down, but at some point they cross and they land on the same frequencies. They land in the same octave, so they're the exact same part, and that makes the guitars kind of like do something like this, which was unintentional, but after some fiddling around, I'll tell you that it was intentional. And the same thing happens at the end, except this one drops and this one stays the same. But that same effect happens where eventually they cross and the whole stereo field monos out for a second and widens, and it just sounds obnoxious and stupid. But that's kind of what this part is. I also have some risers going on. Oh, let me go back to the and show you what those guitars sound like with those pitches on them. Guitars should never sound like that. It's awful. But it makes the part chaotic and it makes it really work when it drops out. I also have some risers going on here. Doing the same kind of thing, just adding movement. I have a grinder, it looks like. I think I just wanted another synth there just because. And I also have those little droppy woos that I have from the beginning. Once again, most of that stuff is so in the background that you can feel it more than anything else. And I just have a couple of impacts accented the parts. Coming out of it, I have all of the groups in the song automating down so their volume cuts out completely for this little white noise. It's just a dramatic pause. After that, the whole song ramps back in. All right, so let's listen to that whole end section with the white noise part. Yeah, it literally just sounds like a wrestling theme. So this white noise part is just a white noise generated file. Stupid. Just makes it dramatic. The whole end of the song is almost the exact same as the beginning of the song. I don't think I did anything different except a couple of drum fills here and there. But that's literally it. The end of the song has the reverb fade out that we talked about. So let me just listen to the last little bit of the song quick, just so we can hear that fade out one more time. Cool. So that's it. So yeah, guys, that's basically the entire Cyberpunk song that we did in one day. Tons of construction. It was a lot of time, but usually when projects happen fast like this, I think usually they're my best results because I don't sit on something for so long, thinking about it every day, what I could be doing different about it, and that my mix might be too bassy. So yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you want to know any more about any of the processing I did or the gear that we use, also let me know that too. I can do more of these and I want to do them if it's helpful to people. So yeah, just let me know below and check out our videos, please. Thanks.